Hello guys, and welcome to a very special episode of Robocraft, where today we'll be discussing about combat tips. Now, because this game is relatively new, and I believe it was released around 2013 through early 2014-ish, there are going to be a lot of new players who are unfamiliar with the mechanics in this game. So I figured I would take it upon myself to make this guide to hopefully inform both new and veteran Robocrafters on how to efficiently kill and fight in this game. Now, before this video starts, because of the many different vehicular designs that people create, this guide will be generalized and results may vary. I will still give you guys the essential tips on combat and fighting, and hopefully all of you will find them to be helpful when you incorporate them into your playstyle. Covered in this video today, we'll be going over some of the obvious and not so obvious fundamentals, and I will be expanding upon this guide later in the future, so stay tuned for that. And with everything said and done, let's get started. So the first advice I would give to you guys would be to travel in groups. Now, this advice isn't something of a mind-blowing revelation, as most players have already known this. But it should go without saying that working with your team is important, and you will see me emphasize this throughout the guide, so keep this in mind. Grouping up with your teammates increases your survivability rate, as your squad can soak up some of the damage away from you, and on top of that, you'll be able to dispatch enemies quicker. Where they shoot can also locate the enemies for you if you lack a radar, and the list goes on and on. One exploit about this tip that I found to be very useful is when I utilize the types of vehicles my teammates have. A good example would be here in this gameplay where I am being shot by an enemy interceptor. When the game started, I took note of the types of vehicles my groups have, and I made a special note on a medic. So when we left our base, I made sure to stay close to him at all times so that he can heal me like what you saw earlier. This is just a basic example of utilizing your team's vehicular type, but as you play longer, you'll start to get the gist of it. Another example is if your group has all rail cannoners and you're an SMG, don't push. Instead, stay back to provide suppressive fire to cover your snipers so they can do damage at a safe, optimal range. So remember to use this strategy and shift your playstyle accordingly to your team's vehicle, as this will be worthwhile. Now here in this gameplay, you can see that my team is pushing up this path and that I am constantly flicking my crosshair back and forth up this cliff. What I'm doing here is what I call prioritizing your target. I see that my SMG teammates have the road covered, so what I do is shift my focus to the enemies on the cliff. Prioritizing your target is a key essential to winning battles against multiple enemies, as it can save your life and your teammates. You have to decide the most prominent threat in your vicinity and take it out quickly before it does serious damage. In the gameplay here, the most serious threat came from the enemies on the cliff, so I prioritized my target there. Later you saw me switch my priority back onto the road as my teammates are getting destroyed as well, so you have to adjust your priorities. Prioritizing targets can also be implemented in solo combat as well. Here in this gameplay, you will see me disable this medic first before downing his other friend. The medic heals 1/3 at the rate at which I do damage, so I essentially am doing 2/3 of the full damage, and so I have to destroy the medic first. Of course, I could have ignored the medic and went for the guy first, but that would have made the fight more complicated. In some situations, it is sometimes best to go for the main target first instead of the medic, so focusing on which enemies to destroy first varies based on the situation and on their builds. Typically, when you ignore the medic and go for his healed teammate, it's because the teammate is fragile and you can dispatch him quickly. If you prioritize correctly, you'll see yourself being able to take down multiple enemies or save your team from dire situations more easily. So make sure to practice prioritizing a lot, as it can improve upon your gameplay. So now moving on to spotting. When I enter lower tiers, I find that a lot of new players tend to not spot, whether it be because a few of them don't know how to spot or they don't see the importance in it. Even in tier 10, I still find a few people not spotting the enemy when they were supposed to. The importance of spotting stems from the fact that it can help you and your team locate and keep track of where the enemies are, therefore bringing you closer to victory than ever before. So I cannot emphasize it enough to spot almost whenever you can. You'll see here that I'm not directly engaging the enemies, but instead hiding behind this cliff. Firstly, I'm outnumbered and will die if I engage directly, so instead I keep myself hidden behind the cliff and spot them for my team. This is extremely helpful for them because they can now focus on capping the point without having to worry about where the enemies are. On top of that, I can also keep track of where they're moving, so I can keep myself hidden in case they come looking for me. However, in some situations, you don't want to spot at all. A good example would be if you're trying to ambush an enemy. Spotting them will alert them that somebody has line of sight on them, and they will check in every direction to see where you are. That's not good. Instead, what you want is to keep your enemies as relaxed as possible and off guard so you can exploit that and take them by surprise. The split moment before you ambush them, however, is the ideal moment for you to spot since enemies won't react in time. This gameplay here is a perfect example of what I mean. You would see here that the split second after I fired my shot, I spotted them. By the time they realize they have been spotted, my plasmas have already hit them and they couldn't avoid my shot. So this tactic is really effective if you want to ambush your enemy and do some massive initial damage. When you feel that you're about to be overwhelmed by the enemy, sometimes the best option will be to retreat. I see a lot of players trying to stand their grounds or retreating just a little bit only to get killed in the end. You have to have situational awareness on the battlefield and assess the situation at hand. If you can come to the conclusion that you won't win the fight at all, then your best option will be to just fall back. If you do choose to retreat, then you want to retreat towards your teammates. That way they can provide covering fire for you, heal you, and draw fire away from you. Remember when I said that teamwork is important in the beginning of this guide? Well, now is a great example of showing you guys the importance of working with your team. I see that my group won't be able to hold this position much longer, so I decided to retreat. If the enemy had decided to push us, then I would have died easily. Watch as I retreat towards my team and not away from them. Now I have someone helping me to fend off the enemy and a medic is coming by to heal me back to full health. Soon you're going to see my team launch a counterattack and repel the enemies back, and now the table has been turned. So now I'm at full health, still contributing to my team's victory, and I'm not dead. You can see how useful retreating is when it is used correctly. Even if I did die and my team still won, I would not have gained as much RP if I was still alive. Sometimes the best option at hand is to be patient and give some ground to the enemy. That way you can still be a contribution to your team, as you being alive is more useful than you being dead, and in the end you'll end up with more RP than if you just decided to stay and fight. Try to keep this strategy in mind the next time you're in a supposedly losing battle. You should find yourself surviving longer matches than previously before and earning more money because of this. Finally, if you want to know how to kill your enemies quickly, you generally have two options. You either disarm or you pilot kill. Whichever one you choose varies depending on the situation, what type of bot you have, your positioning, and your enemy's status. Generally in higher tiers, especially in tier 10, I found that disarming tends to be a very effective strategy as players in those tiers tend to protect their pilot seat extremely well. So instead of going for his pilot seat, I would want to destroy their weapons first, then finish them off afterward. The only thing your opponent can do after that is drive around in circle as your guns gradually whittle them down block by block until you destroy them. Disarming is a very great way in dealing with opponents who have fortified their pilot seats well. If you go for the disarm first, you'll be taking a lot less damage as your opponents won't be able to damage you any further. Once you've completely disarmed your opponent, they are essentially dead. One effective way to disarm your opponent is to generally aim for the blocks beneath the guns. Sometimes you might set off a chain reaction and destroy 2 or 3 guns because you destroyed a crucial block that was holding a lot of guns together. If the vehicle is protecting the blocks underneath the guns very well, try aiming for the guns themselves. If your aim is well enough, you can still disarm them quickly. Another way to try to kill your enemies is to simply go for his pilot seat. If you can destroy the block beneath the pilot, then the robot is immediately destroyed no matter how much health it has. Keep in mind though that many good players will shield their pilot seats very well, so if you do decide to go for it, you better know what you are doing. What I suggest is to try and get the right positioning on your enemy. People tend to focus on armoring up their vehicles on the front and sides, so that leaves the bottom, top, and back very exposed. If you can try to flank your enemy and hit them on the back and somewhere in the middle, that's where the pilot seat should be. If you're a walker or flyer or can flow above your enemy, try to shoot at the top of their vehicles and somewhere in their back. People generally don't reinforce their top side, so that should leave their pilot seat exposed. If anything, you should be able to disarm them pretty badly and cripple them with the right shots. The same goes for the bottom side of the vehicles. If you see the bottom of the enemy, then try to aim somewhere in the middle and to the back. The block beneath the pilot seat tends to lay unprotected, so it is very possible to one-shot your opponent from this. Flyers, however, can be an exception to this rule as they usually shield their bottom since they're flying above and getting shot from below. In that case, try to clip off their wings to make them less maneuverable or just simply grind away at their armor until you hit their pilot seat. Since flyers need to be light in order to stay afloat, their armors can't be as strong as those on the ground. So don't be shy when killing them and be pretty liberal with your shots. You'll be surprised as to how often you can one-shot a flyer with the right hit. So that pretty much wraps up for this combat guide. I'll be sure to add more to this in the future, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you have any of your own combat tips that you want to share, feel free to leave them down here on the comments section. Who knows, it might appear in the next guide coming soon. Like and subscribe this video if you found this guide to be helpful, and I'll see you guys later. This is the CurryNinja.